It's here and only here on the Sci-Fi Channel. Get ready for high energy, high impact anime from Japan.
Is this Fantasia?
It's not kid stuff, kid. It's the real thing. Animation like you've never seen before. Grown-up animation that kicks.
Bingo!
When the Sci-Fi Channel presents the 3rd Annual Festival of Anime. All this week at 9 Eastern.
What's up, fuckers? So, as you can see here, I'm actually playing Gundam Wing Endless Duel on my phone. I kind of felt like, since we are gonna be on the anime topic, that I'd use this gameplay footage as background. And by the way, if you're into old school fighting games, this right here is an underrated gem. It was released for the SNES and is honestly, for me, the best 16-bit fighting game at only 16 megs. So yeah, let's get right into the topic at hand. So my reasoning for doing this video was recently watching a video from Technical Workrate Productions. They were basically roasting this fucking loser named... Actually, nah, he's not even worth mentioning. But if you saw their video, they were basically roasting this fucking dude who's creepy because I've heard he reviews hentai and shit like that. And he's been like stalking underage girls who are like still in their teens or whatever. But, I mean, if you saw their video, you'll know what I'm talking about, but... I'm just gonna put the link down below because, like, I don't want to mention his name because he's not worth mentioning. But I'm watching the video and he's obviously a smark, so no surprise there. But I couldn't help but watch the video and seeing them tear him apart. And just looking at this dude's channel, I'm just saying to myself, man, it's people like him that make anime fans look bad. And it only further reminded me of why I gave up on the genre. I mean, come on, he has the word otaku in his name. Now, that's not to say that I don't want anything to do with anime anymore, because there have been a few modern animes that I've actually enjoyed. But for the most part, I don't give a shit about most modern anime. And it's a crying shame because I used to heavily be into this form of animation. And I'm gonna give you a story of my history with anime, and how big a fan I used to be of it, and how over the years I just fell off. That is if you even bother to listen all the way through, because the last thing I'd want to do is bore my viewers. But here's how it all started for me. So this goes back to the mid-90s. When I was a kid in the 90s, anime, or as we used to call it, Japanimation, was like this new form of animation that was already starting to resonate with American audiences back in the 80s and 90s, and gave people an alternative to Western cartoons. And there was so much variety. I remember getting into shit like Ninja Scroll, Berserk, Ghost in the Shell, the Guyver Bio Booster series, Wicked City, Cyber City 808, Blue Gender, and Vampire Hunter D, etc. I actually remember having a VHS with Maddox 01 on it, and watched it a few times growing up. One thing I do miss are the raw, dark, grungy aesthetics from a lot of these old school animes, especially in the cyberpunk genre. It just had its own uniqueness, which gave the atmosphere a cool edge. I know a lot of things now are computer generated, but I would love to see more of this traditional hand-drawn animation to make a comeback, especially with that gritty look they had going for it. And I also sincerely miss that ultra-violence phase. Believe it or not, but there was at one point in time when anime was aimed at an actual young adult audience. Back in the 80s and 90s, anime was still fairly new, so they weren't so heavily censored, which meant they could write the storylines they wanted and get away with it with more dark themes and sometimes sickening violence. No one really noticed because the censors weren't paying attention. I mean, cartoons were made for kids after all, so why bother? And it's also for the fact that manga and anime weren't as governed as tightly as they are today. And artists deliberately tried to make a lot of manga and anime as gory as possible. The censors were pretty lenient back in the 80s and in the 90s. OVAs were all the rage due to said censorship. Shows like Devilman and Genocyber didn't have to comply with any sort of television guidelines since they were OVAs. Therefore, they could go balls to the wall as they please. And honestly, this was anime in its golden age, cause the producers were thinking about how to amaze the consumers and give them the best services. Well, not fan service, or at least what we know of it today, but services by good plot, good characters, and gore that can add a lot more suspense and thriller to the show. And I must say, they had a serious balls back then to do stuff like that. In the 80s and the 90s, men wanted to be real men, and women wanted to be real women. Things weren't always perfect. I mean, it never is anyways. But at least we weren't infantilized and had no fear of growing up, and no denial of growing old. That's how I remembered getting into anime. It was through stuff like this, thinking how cool, edgy, and violent it was. Nothing like the anatomy of gore, guts, organs, brain matter, and parts of your flesh flying, spewing, and belching all over the place. Kind of makes those anime gore wannabes these days look like child's play. Call me one sick motherfucker, but as someone who's such a huge horror fanatic, you can never get too gory for me. I'm just a huge sucker for ultra-violent shit in media, whether it's horror, Splatterhouse, Mortal Kombat, ECW, Doom, you name it. That's how anime was initially marketed, along with a lot of the cyberpunk stuff. As someone who's huge into the cyberpunk genre when it comes down to Blade Runner or Terminator, I remember these as one of my introductions to anime when I was watching the late night sci-fi channel on Saturdays. That's right, all before Toonami was a thing. My local channel used to air it after ECW wrestling each weekend. And the first things I remember watching were Vampire Hunter D and Demon City Shinjuku. But I also remember Toonami starting a while later on that Cartoon Network channel. And seeing a few new animes on there like Mobile Suit Gundam Wing, Cowboy Bebop, Outlaw Star, and of course Dragon Ball Z. I became obsessed with anime, and went to the Blockbuster video store and rented Akira after missing it on TV. And I remember only being able to watch some at my friend's house. And was it a premium channel? I can't remember for the life of me. But anyways, I think anime introduced me to the philosophy and a much more mature way of viewing the world. This was what was gonna compete against American cartoons here in the West, because back then you had Batman the animated series, Gargoyles, Beast Wars, the Transformers, fucking Spawn the animated series, you know, fucking Eon Flux, you know, a lot of that cool shit. And as a kid, it was pretty mind-boggling seeing all these things from cartoons. Hell, even looking back at them, the animation still holds up. Well, for the most part anyways, because shows like Guyver and Berserk, their animation looks pretty dated by today's standards. I mean, they're great shows, but come on, their animation was not the best. But this was still a great era for anime. This was all before Pokemon and Sailor Moon were a thing, and all this moe shit took over and fucked it all up. Ugh. And now we may not see the likes as one. The censorship has become distinguishedly overreaching. We have a bunch of dipshits and fuckheads who think that just because it's animated, that it must be somehow related to drawing in kids. Shallow mind politicians who believe in their voice should speak for all who seem to spend more time worrying about animated fictional characters, that they made time on their personal beliefs being turned into law instead of getting real progress made to protect their local citizens from real threats, like their fellow overreaching politicians who vote for their own pay raises instead of what their citizens actually point out are real problems. Yeah, way to go, political asshats. You went so far out of your way to worry about fictional animated things that are no worse than a 50 Shades of Grey novel. Now the producers are only thinking about how to give the best fan service possible. That's right, away from the violence, since these Japanese dipshits are requesting more cute animes with cute teen girls in slutty outfits, doing cute things for creepy adult men, yes, I said men, to fap off to instead of it being a form of animation to explore deeper themes and more serious tones. It's become a lost art these days, and while there are a few that fit the category like Devilman Crybaby and Dorohedoro, but it's a shame I have to dig and look for it, because that shouldn't be the case. Much like a lot of today's music, you have to search for good music because you sure as hell won't find it on the radio. But that's not what this video is about. It's like now when you think of anime, you think about this Bishoujo style that's become more prevalent, and it's all monitored too. But I'll get to that. But yeah, I used to heavily be into anime, and I firmly believe the anime trailers I saw on VHS from Blockbuster laid my foundations for my anime hobby. That didn't surface until I saw Dragon Ball Z on Toonami years later. And like I said earlier, I was exposed to shows like Mobile Suit Gundam Wing, Rurouni Kenshin, Yu Yu Hakusho, Outlaw Star, and I can go on. Unfortunately, I haven't watched too much in the anime department since 2005, and those were basically the times my passion for anime kind of ended alongside wrestling, because you had a bunch of cheesy shonen crap like Naruto and One Piece becoming popular, and stuff like Zatspel and Bobo, whatever you call it. I really didn't care for those shows. I was already growing out of cartoons since the early 2000s, and I really didn't have time for crap like those. And also for the fact that DBZ stopped airing on TV. So I basically stopped watching anime and just kinda moved on. But then Bleach kind of resurrected my interest a little bit. I thought it was okay, but it falls under the same category of problems with a lot of these long-running shonen animes. It goes on forever and there's way too much filler. I mean, I will say it started off pretty good, but once it got to the filler, it just became ridiculous. But I will say things became a bit more interesting for me after the Soul Society arc, especially with Aizen as the main villain. He was great. It's also responsible for giving me one of my favorite and most badass fictional anti-heroes in Kenpachi. Now that guy is fucking crazy. But I thought the show was alright overall. I did enjoy a few other 2000s animes as well, from Full Metal Alchemist, Techno Eyes, Death Note, Black Lagoon, Elfen Lied, Monster, Dead Man Wonderland, and Hellsing. I don't like Naruto. I've always thought that show was overrated. Same with One Piece. Only watched a few episodes and that's it. And I honestly blame shows like those for starting the trend of a lot of these shonen animes with cheesy lead protagonist, who always wants to be the very best. Yeah, just a bunch of Dragon Ball Z ripoffs with cliche storylines and repetitive fights on, oh, who's the strongest, or who can power up the most and prove who's got the bigger dick. That's all it is. It's just boring, and it's so cliched at this point. Can we do something different? Like, I want to see more sci-fi, horror, or gory anime come back. I mean, yeah, there have been a few shonens I've liked, but those are just old school animes, and now I've outgrew them, and so should you. I mean, come on, these shows were originally made for teenagers. There's like better shit out there that you could be watching. And now this genre is so oversaturated, much like comic book movies. Grown men still get invested in that stuff. People like that are a disgrace to humanity. Animes like those are just a huge disgrace to the genre, and this is honestly what's holding back anime, and why the stereotype that anime is for kids is still a thing, but it's not as big of a disgrace with all this moe shit going on. Ugh. Talk about the most embarrassing thing to ever happen to the genre. Almost everything is moe slice of life bullcrap and angsty 13-year-old kid voiced by a female. The market is so oversaturated with high school cute girls for horny teens and adults, and in a weird way, the adults are more turned on by that shit than the actual teens. Yeah, because that's art by the plebeian consumerism. I mean, seriously, all of this high school slice of life, Ani-sama protect the squealy, waifu bullshit. Ugh, stuff like this is what gives anime a bad name. It's no wonder why the general public thinks it's for weirdos. And that's in large part for why I've kind of distanced myself away from that genre. Sure, there are still good animes nowadays, but they are so hard to find since there are like hundreds of animes released every year. The only ones I've really enjoyed from the 2010s were Parasite, Attack on Titan, Dororo, Vinland Saga, the Castlevania Netflix series, and Devilman Crybaby. Dragon Ball Super was meh, but I did enjoy the tournament saga where Goku fought Jiren. The Broly movie was pretty good, even though they retcon a bunch of shit, but that's pretty much it. Anime now is just so oversaturated and dumb too. Just too much filler shown in anime and moe shit just oversaturating the market. We need more shit like Devilman Crybaby or Parasite, because this shit is a fucking disgrace. Shame on everybody involved for making this. And shame on you people who enjoy this crap. Because you, yes you, are part of the problem. But all in all, anime was something I grew up with as a positive experience. But now I don't have time to watch a lot of anime anymore. For one, because I have a life, and most of the stuff nowadays just doesn't interest me with a lack of creativity and variety. Everything now feels so generic and appeals more to the fanboy otaku culture. Maybe once in a while when I do come across one that I've heard good things about, and it actually captures my interest, then I may actually sit down and watch it. Like I said, the Castlevania Netflix series, Devilman Crybaby, Dororo, Vineland Saga, and even Dorohedoro, which came out this year. Those were like the last modern animes I've actually enjoyed. Castlevania to a lesser extent because that's American made, but it's still a great show. I don't even watch much Toonami anymore since the last time I watched it. I saw mostly shonen crap like One Punch Man, My Hero Academia, Boruto, and this other show called Black Clover or something like that. I know there are a few of my subs that are into these types of shows, but they don't do it for me. The block itself just doesn't have that same magic that it once had in the early 2000s. It's just there. I still check out Toonami here and there if I'm flipping through channels and I see something interesting like Parasite or something, then I'll watch it, but that's it. And that's pretty much my video. So I hope I didn't bore any of you too much, but it's whatever. I had to give my thoughts on the subject at hand since I never talk about it here. I may do anime reviews in the future if there is a demand for it, and it all depends if I have a time for it. But anyways, fuckers, I'm out of here. Later.